I love dragons in death, 'cause they are fun.
Hope your day's going well. I'm Tory Torrential. This is Tory Survives Game of Thrones. It's kind of a blind reading and reaction, also slash like comedic abridgment of the Song of Ice and Fire. The Game of Thrones is the current book we're on. We're on chapter 15, which is Sansa 2. Now, when we, in case you didn't see the previous ones, they're heading south from the north to King's Landing because the king, Robert Baratheon, asked Sansa's father to be his hand. So basically, he can't refuse it, even though there's a bunch of trouble going on in Winterfell. And they're in a long column that is traveling, back to the kingdom. The roads are pretty iffy right now. Like, a lot of the time, they're having a set camp on the actual roads. There's a big procession. There's about 400 people. And Sansa's just riding to get to King's Landing. She's been betrothed to Prince Joffrey, so being the girliest girl ever and everything that is girl, she's a total fangirl. He might as well be Joffrey Bieber, because she's just in her head swooning constantly, and her sister is like the bane of her existence, because Arya, who we already know is just the living embodiment of punk rock, is running around in like 3-day-old leathers, making friends with anybody, talking to people, running into the wilderness, getting like poisonous flowers for her dad in the swamps and stuff, and getting covered in rashes and bruises inexplicably. She's been running around with the butcher's boy, this guy named Micah, and they're just going on adventures. They're seeing stuff, and this kind of comes to a head because on this particular day or the next day, the queen has invited them to ride with them in the wheelhouse, like the big royal RV. And Sansa, as someone who's dainty and super ladylike, is like, oh my gosh, the queen, and she's loudly lamenting in her head, why couldn't she be sisters with Myrcella, who is also, the princess, and is just like a sweet, super girly girl as well. Now, she's eating breakfast with the Septa. She's feeding Lady some bacon, and the Septa Mordain is like, that's not how ladies roll. And Sansa's like, my father said that I could keep my direwolf, and it's not a dog that I'm feeding at the table. It's my direwolf, right? And it's important to note, this is the first time we really see her interact with Lady, and I guess Lady takes after Sansa. She's very proper, she eats very gently, and generally, she's a girly girl wolf as well. So the Septa's talking about it, and it's saying, both y'all, and she's like, you should wear something pretty and dress up and everything. And Sansa's already on it. Like, she's got like her best like little blue silks, and she brushed out her hair so it's all super long and luxurious and stuff, because she thinks like not only is she gonna get like be able to hang out, but she might see Joffrey. and she swoons every time she sees Joffrey. Well, thinks of him. She's just like, oh, Joffrey, my perfect knight. You know, like, she's up in her head just romanticizing. You know how little girl crushes go. Like, you know, if she had a class folder, there'd be like a little heart and like Joffrey's name plus Sansa, you know, because that's the role. Like, she was raised to be a little girly girl princess, and then she got betrothed to the actual prince where she might be queen. So she's just riding that out. Meanwhile, you know, Arya sees the opportunity. Like, she's been forced into this role. She realizes on the road they can't watch her that well, and she can just go do a bunch of tomboy stuff like she likes, and she's raising hell, you know. And Sansa tells Septa Mordain about as much. She's like, I'll tell Arya, but she's gonna wear what she wants to wear. And like, she's really worried that Arya's gonna ruin this for her. So, you know, they're going around, and she ends up actually talking with Arya, kind of, you know, at the end of that day. And Arya is covered in mud and stuff because, you know, she got the poison flowers, and someone, I think Micah, told her, like, yeah, rub mud on it, it'll stop the itch and stuff. So she's dirty, Nymeria is dirty, they've been off adventuring, and she's like, you know, the queen invited us to ride with them tomorrow, and Arya's not having it. She's like, nope. You know. And Sansa's like, what? Why? Like, you can't refuse the queen. And she's like, me and Micah are gonna go look for rubies in the river. And I thought this was really kind of fun folklore. And she's like, rubies? And then, you know, Arya looks at her like, are you dumb? Like, you know, in this fjord over here, that's where the king killed Rhaegar. You know, so we're looking for Rhaegar's rubies. And because they're just going off on adventures, like they get into it a little bit, but Sansa's like, but the wheelhouse, you know, like there's gonna be the queen and the princess, and, you know, we're gonna sit on pillows and stuff. And Arya's like, it doesn't even have windows. And Sansa's like, there's nothing to see. And Arya's like, oh yes, there is. I've seen so much stuff. Like, I saw so many flowers. I got shown a lizard lion, which I think lizard lions are actually alligators, I'm not sure, and stuff. But she's like, we saw a haunted watchtower. And, you know, she's trying to run off, do rubies, because she's just taking full advantage of the lack of eyes on her right now. And Sansa's like, why would you go riding? Because in Sansa's head, she's like, all riding does is get you dirty and sweaty and whatever, you know. Because Arya kind of pulls her card. She's like, if you ever went riding, like, you'd know, you know. And I think that might be a little point of contention, because remember, she's not that good on a horse, and Arya is better than her, so she might be avoiding it just because Arya is better. But anyway, like, she's like, you know, why wouldn't you want to, you know, sit around on feather pillows and eat lemon cake and relax? And Arya is just literally like, because I don't like the queen. You know, just flat says it, right? Making her the most punk rock thing ever. Like, you know, she's just, God save the queen, God save the queen, right? And she's like, I'm not going. Now, it's kind of a funny scene because it's interspersed, and as much as Lady is this proper wolf that, like, does everything, you know, like, real dainty, like Sansa, Nymeria is much like Arya's dog. So she's trying to brush the mud and the tats out of Nymeria, and Nymeria is just like, no, no. Like, I don't like this, no. You know, and she's chasing her around everywhere. And at one point, Nymeria gets away and she gets her by the neck, and then as soon as she pulls the brush out, like, she struggles away and like skirts, and she's like, nah. You know, so Nymeria is a very punk rock wolf as well, right? Punk rock wolf. Anyway, so they get to this inn the next day, and everybody's all fine and whatever. Arya's screwed off as far as we know, and the queen is up by the inn, and she's like, oh, the council does us a great honor, and there's a bunch of people around, you know. So Sansa's walking, and she walks up to a squire, and she's like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, the council sent some people to help escort everybody back, because apparently, you know, it's the royal procession. They sent some muscle, basically. So she looks, and there's this really kind of impressive armor. It's like white and silver. She knows it's the King's Guard armor. And when she turns, there's this like kind of older looking dude, but he looks like ready to go, you know? And next to him, there's this really tall, like black haired dude, you know, with like long flowing locks. He's got like forest green armor, and he's got a helmet under his head, and it has like golden horns on it and stuff. And apparently he's very attractive. Like, Sansa's like, oh, he's super handsome. And then she looks to the third guy by the horse, and he's brutal looking, like just meh. He's got like super unadorned armor. It's just like boiled leather. There's chainmail over it, and he has like the scariest look she's ever seen. And she's like looking at him, and she's shook. She's like, you know. So she takes a step back, and she feels like kind of hands on her shoulders, just kind of like, whoa, don't walk into me, you know. And at first she thinks it's her dad, but when she wheels around, it's Clegane, the Hound, and he's looking down at her, and, you know, he's got his face, like, all scarred up and stuff, and because she was, like, shaking, you know, from seeing the other guy, to the point where she's been scared of the Hound and his burned face, and she notices, like, he's, like, half as scary as this other guy. And the Hound, ever the dick, is like, oh, come on, I don't scare you that bad, do I? You know? And Lady is just not having it. Like, she senses like Sansa's scared and stuff, and Lady's like, you know. So everybody turns, and they're like, what the hell was that? You know, because you hear a dire wolf start growling, like, you take notice. So they're all sitting there, and Sansa, you know, ever the apple polisher, is dying of embarrassment, being the center of attention and having her wolf act out. So she's like hugging Lady a little bit, and when she looks up, both of the knights that she saw are standing there like with their swords out, like because they see a dire wolf, like they just act. And she's like, no, you know, and like she's trying not to cry and keep it together. And people are like laughing and saying things, and they're like, is that a wolf? And they're like, you know, what the hell? That's a dire wolf. And the Hound, of course, ever the whatever, he's like, yeah, the Starks use them as wet nurses, you know, just being a whatever. And then Cersei actually says, Joffrey, go to her, you know, because she's in a bad way. Like, she's surrounded by knights, they're laughing at her, she's freaking out. So Joffrey wades in, and he's wearing like some like black and blue armor, and he's like, leave her be, you know, like making a big show of protecting her, basically. And as soon as she sees him, like, it works. Like, she just falls for it. She's like, Joffrey, you know, like, and she's like, he's saving me, just like Serwyn, the Mirror Knight, and the Dragon Knight, you know, like, she's actually comparing him to legendary knights in her head, right? And he's like, put your swords down, it's just her little pet, you know? And at that point, like, the two knights sheathe their swords and whatnot, and they're standing up. And the older knight is like, "Hi, I'm you know, Sir Barristan. It's a pleasure to meet you, Sansa Stark. You know, son of the Hand and stuff." And her like formal training gets in. Now, I'm not a noble woman, so I'm not gonna remember all of his accolades. But she's like, and you, Barristan the Bold. So this is actually, you know, the Knight of Legend, Barristan the Bold, commander of the King's Guard, right? And the guy next to him who's standing there is like, more like, Barristan the Old, am I right? Am I right? Am I right? You know? And he's like, I'll tell you what though, if you can name me, then I'll know for sure you are Sansa, the daughter of the Hand, but otherwise, you know. And Joffrey and Barristan are like, bro, don't put her on the spot like that. And she's like, I can answer, right? And she's like, I see with your antlers and stuff, you're from the royal family, and due to your extreme youngness and stuff, because he's only 20, I would name you Renly Baratheon, you know, the youngest brother of the king. And she's right. He's like, starts laughing. He's like, hey, you know. And Barristan the Bald is like, and due to his extreme youngness, I would name him a jackanape. You know. And so it's Barristan the Old and the jackanape. And they both start laughing though, like, you know, they're buddies. They're screwing with each other, and that helps like ease up the tension, and you know, all of that. Well, then he's like, you know, don't worry about him too much. Like, he's supposed to be scary, you know. Sir Illiam even gets under my skin sometimes. And then she knows it's the King's Justice, which is like an executioner, Sir Illiam Payne. And he just walks over and stares at her. He doesn't say anything. He's just staring at her. And the whole time he's staring at her, she can feel like her clothes stripping away, her flesh stripping away. And it feels like he's looking directly into her soul. And she, you know, kind of feeling uncomfortable, she's like, I'm so sorry if I offended you, Sir Illiam Payne. You know, it wasn't my intention. Like, she's still scared, but that's basically... And he just walks away, you know? And she's like, did I say something? And Renly is basically like, he hasn't really been that talkative for like the last 14 years, and kind of walks off. And she looks confused, so Joffrey just kind of like rolls his eyes at his uncle Renly, and he's like, King Aerys had his tongue ripped out with hot tongs, so he didn't say nothing because he can't speak, basically. And they're talking, and the queen is like, you know, it's okay to be a little scared. Like, anybody in the executioner position should scare most people, you know. And Sansa, you know, kind of regaining her composure, because Joffrey also sends the Hound away. He's like, leave, dog, you're scaring my betrothed. And the Hound basically just goes, all right, you know, and leaves. Well, you know, she's like, well, you guys picked really well, you know. And she laughs, and she's like, I'm so sorry, we have council business today. We're going to have to postpone the wheelhouse ride, Joffrey, can you escort Sansa for the day? And Sansa's little heart just goes, you know, because basically, like, she gets Joffrey all to herself for the whole day. And Joffrey, you know, being his mama's boy, he's like, absolutely, you know. And she walks off, and Joffrey's like, okay, so what do you want to do? What should we do? And she's so like up in her head about Joffrey being like this magical knight. She's just like, be with you. But what she actually says, she's like, you know, whatever you want to do, I'll do. And he's like, well, we could go riding. And she's like, oh, I'd love to go riding. Which is funny because she just told Arya, like, you know, all riding does get you dirty and sweaty, and I hate it. But like, as soon as Joffrey's like, let's go riding, she's like, yes, let's go riding, you know. And he's walking, and ladies following him behind, and he's like, I'll tell you what, I think your wolf's gonna scare the horses, and my dog scares you, so let's just leave them behind, and it'll just be me and you. And she's like, you have a dog, you know? And then it like hits her. She's like, oh, you mean the hound? Because he's like, well, it's not my dog, it's my mom's, but she ordered him to protect me, you know. And then she actually says in her head, she's like, I gotta be quicker than this, he's not gonna love me if I'm stupid. So that's where she is. And she's like, okay, da da da. And they ride, and it's not a bad time. Like, you know, they're riding around. Joffrey's like telling her, she's like, yeah, you know, this is where my father killed Rhaegar, right over there. And then, you know, my uncle Jaime killed King Aerys, and that's how he became king. And, you know, he's being like boisterous, kind of like a young boy, like he's mocking the hammer swings and stuff. And then they're kind of by a hold fast and stuff, and it's getting a little late, so they just roll up to the hold fast, and he's like, hey, your prince is here with his betrothed, we need some food. So they just run him a bunch of food out of this hold fast, and they're sitting around eating and drinking. And she tells, you know, Joffrey, she's like, yeah, my dad only lets me have like 1 cup of wine because she's getting a little drinky, you know. And he's like, my betrothed drinks as much as she wants, and like, you know, fills up her cup again. So they're getting like kind of loose, and they're riding out and stuff. And it says Joffrey, you know, is actually Joffrey Bieber, because he starts singing to her, and his voice is high and sweet. So he's like, you know, I don't know the chords, so. You're the only one I've ever loved. Yeah, you. If it's not you, it's not anyone. Looking back on my life, you're the only good I've ever done. It says hi and sweet. Yeah, you. If it's not you, it's not anyone. I'm sorry for that. Deeply. Joffrey Bieber. And if you survived that segue, Sansa's eating it up. Like, she's just like, Joffrey Bieber. Right? Like, because she's got some wine in her. And she's like, he is the best, right? So they start to go, and when you know, they start hearing like, whack, 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 whack. And like, then they hear like a grunt, like, you know, from the woods. And Sansa's like, she's a little drinky, she's a little spooked out. She's like, oh no, you know? And Joffrey, again, you know, he pulls out his sword. He had pulled it out before when he was like, leave your wolf behind, because Sansa's like missing her wolf. He pulls out, and he has this little boy sword, like it's sized down for him, you know, to be a long sword, but it's like blue steel, it's double bladed, and it's castle forged and has like a big lion's head on the either the hilt or the pommel. I think the pommel, and he calls it lion's tooth. You know, because yeah, but he pulls it out, and even the sound of him unsheathing it has Sansa like, ooh, you know, because she doesn't like the sound of steel on leather, I guess. So, yeah, we know things. Anyway, so they go into the forest, and there's this dirty boy and this dirty girl, and they're like running at each other, and they're playing knights, and it looks like they have broom handles. And the boy's way bigger, you know, the girl's smaller, and he's actually on the attack. He's just whack, 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 you know, and she's like fending off most of it and stuff, and then she goes to like thrust, and he parries, goes down, smacks her right in the hand, and she drops her thing, and she's like, ah, you know, and Joffrey laughs, you know, when she gets whapped in the hand, and she's sitting there like sucking on her knuckles. And they're standing there, and Sansa's like, no, because the girl is Arya, and Micah is the boy. You know, so Joffrey's like jumping down with his real sword drawn, and he's like, what do you think you're doing? Do you know that's my lady's sister? You know, because like Sansa confirms that it's Arya, and basically snitches on Arya because Joffrey wouldn't have known. And he's like, do you think it's okay to hit nobles? You know, like, you pretending to be knights, you playing knights and stuff. And he's kind of drunk and kind of mean, so he's like advancing, right? And he's like, pick up your sword, knight. Like, let's play knights. Full well knowing he has, you know, a real sword. And he's like, it's not a sword, my lord. You know, it's only a stick. And he's like, and you're not a knight. You're only a butcher's boy. You know, like, getting on him. You know, and he sticks his sword, like, up on the kid's cheek, like, under his eye. And Arya's like, he's my friend, you need to stop. You know, and the whole time he's like, she asked me to, you know, like, we're playing, you know. And meanwhile, like he's like, don't worry, I won't hurt him much, you know. And like this real kind of insipid streak starts going, and Arya is not having it. Meanwhile, you know, Sansa's like, stop it, the both of you, you know. But she doesn't really chime up until Arya does this, because Arya is like, oh, you just messed with the wrong punk rocker, because she grabs the broom while he's, you know, staring at Micah, and she just full double hand, like, bam, right across the back of his head. And, you know, poor Biebs went down, like, he's freaking bleeding, you know, out the back of his head, and he's like, oh, and by the time he comes to, Micah is gone. Like, Micah sees the opportunity, he's like, boost, you know, just into the woods. And then, you know, Arya, she's still about that life. Like, she's like, I'm gonna teach this dude a lesson. And she goes to, like, swing at him again, and this time he actually parries it with lion's tooth, and, you know, sends the stick away, you know. So she's like, uh-oh. And then he progresses because he's like pissed, so he's cussing, he's saying like all this foul stuff. Like, they don't say exactly what he says, but like, it's terrible words and insults. Like, he's calling her all sorts of like, but he's also slashing at her with his sword, you know. And Sansa's like, stop it, you guys are spoiling it, you know, oh my god, right? Because that's what you do when you're a useless princess. You stand by the side and you go, stop it, the both of you, right? So she's on that, and Arya's like reeling back because, you know, Joffrey, he's all like, I'll kill you, you minute, you know, and stuff. And then boom, right? Hold on. We played by Errol today, but boom, right? There's this gray flash, and Nymeria, latches into Joffrey's sword arm and starts mangling it. Like, he drops his sword, he's on the ground, he's done. He's like, get it off me, because Nymeria is just like, did you just try to stab my girl? Like, and she picks up the sword, she calls off Nymeria, and she's like, oh, come on, she didn't hurt you that much, like mocking him. And she's holding the sword like down on him with both hands. And he's like, don't hurt me, I'll tell my mother, right? Like, he literally threatens to tell his mom for the second time, because Joffrey just certified bitch. There's no other way to say it. But Arya, hears this, and Sansa's like, just go. So Sansa's just like, all right, bet, fuck it. And she full body, like, just throws this sword as hard as she can, and it actually goes, like, into the middle of the river. Like, it soars through the air. It's like twinkling a little bit, and then it just bloop, right? And the sword's gone, and then she jumps up. Well, during the sword fight, it's important to note, like, they're fighting, and even when she didn't have her, like, little broomstick, she, like, scooped up a rock and chucked it at Joffrey's head, and it missed and hit his horse, and his horse ran into the forest too, so, like, Arya she was still fighting, like, she wasn't, like, running away. But then, she relents, and she takes off, into the woods with Nymeria in tow, and, like, she takes off on the horse, and Sansa runs over, and she's like, oh, my poor Joffrey, I'm so sorry that you're hurt. I'll go to the holdfast immediately and get you some help, and I hope you're okay. And, like, she's trying to baby him and stuff, because, I guess she's in love with him. And he gets, like, super cold and, like, shitty, and he's like, then go and don't touch me, and that's the end of the chapter. That is chapter 15, Sansa 2. Basically, it's like, short recap, the whole column's moving south. They send up some more knights to escort everybody. Arya's running wild. Sansa's trying to put on airs. They go on a date, like her and Joffrey, because of the council business. They get a little wasted. They come back. They catch Arya sword fighting Micah, which explains the random bruises and everything. And then Joffrey tries to get sadistic on Micah. Arya beats his ass. Then he gets back up, tries to chop up Arya with his real sword. Nymeria vetoes the hell out of that, being a good girl. And then she steals his sword, chucks it in the river, takes off, and then he starts being a little douchey edgelord to Sansa when Sansa's whatever. Meanwhile, Sansa the whole time is making him out to be this legendary knight of yore who she's absolutely in love with, because she is full fangirl mode, right? And that's it. This has been Tory Survives Game of Thrones, chapter 15, Sansa 2. I hope that's right, Sansa 2. And I love you.
Thanks for watching my show. Like and subscribe.